are taking you to the top of the world.
Good morning from the top of Mount Everest.
A conversation with speaker, author, mountaineer, guide, and PhD, Dr. John Kedrowski.
Get up there, Mike. Touch the top of the world, baby.
He's done 7 expeditions to Mount Everest, spent the night on each of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks. You name it, he's done it, and he's the perfect person to sit down with and have a Colorado conversation. And here he is. Let's get right to it. I'm so excited about this. He literally got off an airplane moments ago at DIA, rushed into an Uber, and hurried down to the studio with not a moment to spare because he was excited about this interview just as we are. So please, if you will, welcome Dr. John Kedrowski. It's so good to see you again, my man.
It's good to see you, Jeremy.
I've known you for a long time. We've done a little bit of hiking together. I think we did Elbert and Massive.
We did.
It was a breeze for you. It was tough for me. and those are like half as tall as the highest mountain in the world. And we're going to get to all of your mountaineering and expeditions and adventures. But I really want to know, what is it like that minute when you set foot on the top of the world? What's that moment? What's that feeling?
It's exhilarating. It's somewhat surreal. And for me, because I've been fortunate enough to do it 4 times, every time I get to go back up, I appreciate it more. But I also kind of get more intimate with the mountain. And what that means is I just understand features on the mountain better. I understand, like, if I'm guiding a client, like the timings and what we need to get done, and understand the situations better, and you just kind of see everything better.
Yeah. I'm curious about what it takes you to get to the top of the mountain, because I used to dream about it. I read Krakauer's book. I was obsessed with Everest. You and I talked about it, I think. I really wanted to get to the top. But there's a difference between wanting it and actually doing it. And what is that next level? What takes you to the next level and makes you actually do it?
I have kind of a philosophy called Everest Ready, and so that involves creating a lifestyle that lends itself to being ready to go climb the mountain at any moment's notice. So, to be Everest Ready means, like, I could literally get off the couch today and go to Mount Everest and climb it because I've been doing things that, like training. And I train clients too, so like I prepare them. And so whether it's like days in the winter skiing, skinning up Vail Mountain, going out and climbing our 14ers, or going on other expeditions, I'm always literally Everest ready to climb the mountain, and that allows me to just go if a client's ready to do it.
So it's staying in shape. It's always just sort of being ready to grab everything and pick up and leave.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things in Krakauer's book was this idea that, at least at the time, if you paid enough money, you could basically get somebody to push you up the mountain. Is that the case anymore, or is there a lot more consciousness about who does it?
There's a little bit of more consciousness, but I also think, in this day and age of Instagram, you get people that go there and kind of have no idea what they're getting into. Yeah. What I've been able to kind of curate is this one-on-one guiding experience, because 3 of the clients out of these 4 summits have been one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And what that means is they hire me to put together their program. I do an evaluation first, check their fitness, check what mountains they've climbed, and then talk about what their goals are. Mm-hmm. And then from that, based on their time and money that they have to spend and devote to their dream of climbing Mount Everest, we can develop a sort of a tailor-made program for them and then execute it.
You talk about time and money. It's such a huge commitment in both departments. So you got to basically pack up and move to Nepal for a couple of months beforehand, right?
Yeah, so it involves that, not only to acclimatize by trekking in and then staying at base camp for up to a month to be acclimatized to climb the mountain, but even prior to that. So like when I guided Mike Posner, who's a dear friend of mine, back in 2021, he came to me with a dream about 2 years before that. And he said, well, hey, I want to deserve to be there. And that was the kind of guy I loved working with. Yeah. And same with Devin LeVake in 2024 last year. He was similar. He had climbed some other mountains, but he came to me and said, hey, I saw what you did with Mike. I want to hire you to train me, to prepare me, and then when we go, you'll guide me, and also create the program in Nepal with my staff, whether it's cooks, Sherpas that we hire, make sure we have tents, comfortable tents in base camp, dining tents on the mountain, and all the bells and whistles that goes along with the logistics.
Yeah, and for those who might recognize the name Mike Posner, he's the singer who did I Took a Pill in Ibiza, and he's had a few other hits too.
Yeah.
A big name and a good friend of yours, and this really all started with his love of mountains, right?
Yeah, so he came to me with a dream, and he had never put crampons on in his life. Wow. And so I was like, well, how much time do you have to devote to this? And he's like, well, I'm all in. And this was like basically in the fall of 2019. Yeah. And that was great.
Get up there, Mike. Touch the top of the world, baby. Touch the top of the world.
allow his program to just go through the winter of 2019 into 2020 and then go, but then everyone knows that COVID happened.
Right.
So when COVID happened, then we had a whole nother year to train, which we actually preferred because we could just go right in our backyard. And then once travel opened up after COVID, I took him to places like Pakistan, Ecuador, Mexico to climb bigger mountains. And we basically, have this philosophy. I say it's train mountains with mountains. Like that's the best way to do it, right? You go and you climb a mountain, and we simulated Everest. So we simulated expedition style climbing. We simulated situational climbing, like what's like to, have the urgency on like a summit night. So like I said, all right, we're going to climb Mount Rainier, but what we're going to do is we're going to start at the base of the mountain, climb 9,000 vertical through the night, which is going to be harder than Everest, but we have to climb through the night, reach the summit at sunrise, and then get back down efficiently as we can, because on an Everest summit night, that's exactly what you have to do.
Yeah.
So we did a series of simulations and built this program up, and then he sort of agreed with me. He said, well, when you think I'm ready, we'll go, and that's what we did.
Yeah, so much work goes into it. So we've talked about the time commitment, and then there's the financial commitment too. It costs a lot to get to the top of Everest.
Yeah, and when you tailor make a one-on-one, and the more of these I do, to be honest, the price goes up a little bit because it's my life too, right?
Yeah.
And I want to know if the client's going to be fit enough. I want to know if the client's going to commit to the program, and then I also want to know that the client can afford the entire program. And so, all those things, it's a time investment, it's a money investment, and they're investing not only in me and my staff, but in themselves to get the job done.
Couple $100,000 probably?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting up there for sure.
Yeah, and that involves permits too, because obviously the Nepalese government, they only let so many people on the mountain every year, right?
Yeah, so kind of technically right now it's not really limited by numbers, but I've been able to fortunately guide clients on the south side of Everest, but then I went to the north side and summited in 2019. And so there's definitely, there's differences and there's pros and cons to either side of the mountain too. And we take that into account based on what the client's needs are and based on what we're kind of allowed to do in any given season.
Yeah, interesting. We're going to talk a lot about some of the things you've seen on the mountain, some unpleasant things that you've been involved with too, and some natural disasters that have occurred while you were trying to get to the top of the world. That's all still to come as we continue to have this Colorado conversation right here on Fox 31 Plus. We'll be right back. Back now having a Colorado conversation with Dr. John Kedrowski. He has summited Everest 4 times. 7 expeditions, right?
Yeah, 7 expeditions. I attempted the mountain twice without supplemental oxygen. And on the north side in 2018, I climbed without oxygen to what's called the Great Pyramid, which is above the 3rd step. So everyone knows on the south side in the Nepal, there's the Hillary Step.
Right.
And that's sort of the famous, sort of cliffy, rocky outcropping that everybody climbs. It's really difficult, and then you kind of walk your way to the summit. Well, on the north side, it's interesting. The mountain's a little more technical, and there's 3 steps like that. One has a ladder on it, the other 2 don't. There's ropes there, and you climb up them, but once you get above the 3rd step, there's this little snowfield called the Great Pyramid, and when I got to the 3rd step, which is at about 400 feet or so from the summit vertical, which you're still about an hour and a half to 2 hours away, especially when you're on no supplemental oxygen, there were some factors that weren't in line with sort of my philosophy and goals of if you break the rules, you're probably not going to come back alive.
Okay.
So that year I decided, I got up and I was climbing through the night. And one of the rules is you probably should start a little later so that the sun starts to hit you when you get above 28,000 feet, the last 1,000 feet on the mountain, because if the sun's not hitting you, you can get cold.
Yeah.
At the time I wasn't quite cold yet, but I was aware that it was about 2 or 3 a.m. and I'm still maybe 2 hours from the summit, and when it starts getting light, and I was worried that I'd get cold. So that's one of the rules. The second rule is that if there's people in the way, like there was a line of climbers, not a big line, there's maybe 8 or 10 people in front of me, I would have to stand there and wait for them to ascend the step to then go up the pyramid and then kind of finish on some cliff bands and walk to the summit. That takes 2 hours at those heights.
Yikes.
And because I was standing there all of a sudden, I had to make the split decision of, well, if I stand here and you're not on oxygen, you can get really messed up.
Yeah.
And it's unknown as to how that affects each person individually, but you nevertheless know if your momentum stops, you're not on oxygen, that could be a game changer. It can kill you.
Yeah, because at that altitude, you're in what they call the death zone. And that literally, it's the altitude is sort of killing you, right?
Yeah, and then the third factor there is the wind. So I was kind of up pretty high, and the winds were pretty strong that evening and into the night, and before the sun started to come up. And so all those factors came together. I stood there in the moment and said, well, I feel good now, but that can change. If you're not breathing oxygen, you're standing there in like 10 minutes or less, something bad can happen. And so I just made the quick decision, turned around and went down, and I got down all the way back to ABC that morning, and survived. But I think there's been other climbers in these similar situations, and they succumb to the elements without oxygen, and that can be bad. And so I learned a lot more from that failure, though, than I did from actually making it to the summit. And I know what the formula is for me. So at some point, I hope to go back and maybe complete that formula.
Without oxygen.
Without supplemental oxygen, yeah.
Wow, how about that? Well, you talk about death. You've seen it on the mountain. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my first summit was kind of a wake-up call. I mean, you and I were talking before the show here, and like, you've read Into Thin Air. I've read Into Thin Air as well. And when I went in 2012, it was crazy what happened. There was lots of wind. We chose to go on a summit day that was a little bit later, like a day after the crowds. And what that allowed us to do was have no crowds, but what happened was windstorm came in too soon. And this happens a lot on Everest with the jet stream. So the windstorm blew in, it was blowing 100 miles per hour. I got knocked off my feet about 500 feet from the summit above what's called the balcony. And at that point you're like, well, you gotta get down as quick as you can. And as I went down that night, there were other climbers that were taken in by the elements, and 7 people died that night.
Wow.
You know?
What's it like when you pass? I know there are ethical concerns too of passing the body of another hiker to try and complete your own climb. What's that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a crazy conversation because I'm sort of having flashbacks of that. Like, I mean, every trip you see this sort of stuff happening, and then that's the big decision is like, who do you help? Who can you help?
Yeah.
Because the effort that it takes you to pick someone up, unless there's 2 or 3 other people with you, will risk your life too.
Yeah.
So in those moments, there was sort of rules that you needed to follow, whether it was like in that first year, I helped save a teammate that was documented on a Dateline NBC documentary at the time.
Yeah.
We helped a Polish guy and injected him with dexamethasone and had Sherpas drag him back to a tent. So it was sort of this carnage, but you did what you could, and then you got out of there because you knew the clock was ticking if you stay exposed in the death zone.
It's everything you can do to keep yourself alive, much less somebody else. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And then if you can descend fast enough and get down far enough, then you won't get overexerted. And so then basically what happens is I was able to go back to base camp, rest for 2 or 3 days, and then Chris Tomer, who's a good friend of ours, gave me a good forecast, and I was able to go back up and make it. And I think that first summit opened the doors to these other summits because that changed my life. I think back a lot to like, well, what if I would not have gone back up and summited? Would I have drugged that opportunity on longer, and would that have changed the trajectory of these other experiences? I don't know.
Yeah, wow. Well, you at least you got to the top, right?
Yeah.
That's a good thing. We've seen those pictures of these traffic jams as you approach the summit. Is that real? I mean, are there 300 or 400 people sometimes waiting to get to the top? And does their performance impact your ability to get to the top and even stay alive sometimes?
It can, but I think what I've gotten really good at and had a knack for, especially when guiding, is to be able to get ahead of the crowds, to really be able to make the decision to wait, to be patient enough and say, well, look, like historically we look at the data, we know that after the 21st every year, later into May, 23rd, 26th, I've had summits, I've had a summit on June 1st. Those are better. Most people leave, they get impatient, they get caught in these early windows when everybody goes because they're afraid it's the only window, and for some reason by human nature, I've never really understood that line because to be honest, fortunately, I haven't had to really stand in that one, the one that's huge where you see like 100 climbers. Yeah. We've always waited till the day after, we've waited a week after. So we've been very fortunate with those decisions, but I think that formula has always worked. And some of the veteran Everest guides, we all kind of stick together on those decisions, and you end up going up there with guys like Garrett Madison or, you know, a few other companies that do it later, and we kind of high five and say, well, hey, we got this great summit. Where's everybody at? Yeah. Well, everybody went early, and then they go home.
Interesting.
So we've been able to manage it properly.
What do you think is the most dangerous part of the mountain? I always think about the crevasses and getting across there on those ladders. What is the most dangerous part?
I think it's twofold. I think one is definitely the Khumbu Icefall is always shifting, and if you don't go through that quickly or efficiently enough, that's a problem. But I think some of the other areas that are kind of sneaky in terms of scary that no one really talks about. One is at the base of the Lhotse face. There's this sort of Bergstrom crevasse where the glacier pulls away from the wall and it creates this big crack, and you have to kind of climb around this crack, and then you're suspended over a hole that's like 500 feet deep into this black hole of a crevasse. And that's scary and kind of nerve-wracking. And then anytime you're coming off the summit, people are tired, and that's when they let their guard down, and that can also be a place where it's just super dangerous.
And that's true on a 14 or two. Coming down can be just as dangerous.
It can be, especially if you have to deal with lightning or if you started too late. You know.
Well, I know Everest is not the only thing that you've done, even though I'm obsessed with it, and we've talked about it forever. So we're going to get into the other things that you're doing in your life when we continue this Colorado conversation with Dr. John Kedrowski. We'll be right back. Back now with our Colorado conversation, Dr. John Kedrowski. He's an adventurer, a mountaineer, been all over the world. And so Everest is the big one, obviously, because it's the granddaddy of them all. But what other major summits have you done?
Well, right now I have got 25 expeditions on each of the 7 summits. And you know what that is the highest peak on each of the 7 continents. And I've either coached clients that have gone with other companies, that's what I've started to specialize in, or if I feel like it's the right fit for me, then I'll go on the trip. So for example, my company, Dr. John's Adventures, we have trips to Kilimanjaro next month with safaris and wellness type stuff for people, including a hike of the highest mountain in Africa. We run programs trekking and hiking through the Khumbu in Nepal to the base of Everest, and then you can add on bigger climbs. We run programs, I've been on, for example, skiing also in Japan, and then we have a big program down in Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in South America. And then some of the other summits have been sort of custom created, like on a one-on-one or two-on-one basis that people hire me to do. And I've been able to kind of start diversifying into other areas of the world too, which has been an incredible blessing. I never thought, most of the things I get asked to do, I never thought I'd be doing them.
Yeah, because did you ever envision this as a career, really?
No, I mean, I thought I'd climb Everest and maybe write a few books, and then I'm a college professor, so I still hold that position at Colorado Mountain College, but now I just specialize in study abroad, which makes sense. We take students to Tanzania, to New Zealand, and to Nepal for glacier and climate change research studies involving cultural experiences in a study abroad setting. So that's the only way I teach now. I don't teach in the classroom anymore, but I prefer it that way because then my company's grown enough to where we have these networks in all the different countries, and so then we take people to those places. And then on top of that, people will hire me for domestic type programs based on what permits we can get, but also if people are training, Colorado is the best backyard for that, so we go train all over the place.
And you've done all of Colorado. You spent the night on the summit of every 14er in the state, right?
Yeah, that was sort of, if you look back, that was sort of the landmark project that I think began this madness, as you can recall. It was like 2011, 2012, so going on almost 15 years ago, I set out to see if it was possible in one summer to spend the night on every summit. And Chris Tomer was my partner for that. He came on about 10 of the summits, but the rest of the time, because back then we didn't have this fancy cell coverage or radar apps on the tops of all mountains. So he was able to send me forecasts and we communicate of the conditions, and I was able to pull that project off.
And that's what really lit the fire.
That lit the fire because it not only allowed me to write a book and share the love of these mountains and start educating people on safety and things like that, but then I did a project after that where I actually did the Cascade volcanoes. So I spent the night on the top of the 20 highest volcanoes and skied down, and because I'm a skier, and so when I see a mountain mainly, I want to know how you can ski down it. And then that led me to doing other books, like I did a guidebook to hiking in Colorado, I did a ski guidebook here, and so now as I've gotten through those books and those projects, after going to other places now, and Everest multiple times, I've actually been to Nepal 24 times now in my career.
Wow.
And so another book about Everest and what I call the Everest Ready mindset is in the works.
So if somebody wants to buy those books or even book an adventure with you, they go to your website?
Yeah, my website's just drjohnsadventures.com, and there's trip stuff on there. We have a whole training program set there. We've got coaches that work with you remotely, and then we can work with you individually, and then you can book our trips and our programs that are all over the world.
Very cool. Just a couple minutes left. We'll do a little lightning round. What's your favorite mountain in the world?
Man, that's such a hard one, but to be honest, nothing's better than going up on Capitol Peak.
Monday, August 17th, summit of Capitol. Team today, John, Chris, and Tara. Our friend, I don't know who he is yet, but we did it. Great views out of the rest of the elk range. So I put my tent right where you're standing. Wow. when I slept up here that time.
Must not have been very comfortable.
I had double pads. Actually, I laid it like right here. Nice job, guys. Made a pretty good time. It's like 7:40 in the morning. You know, so not bad. Plenty of time to get down.
Some of the mountain from K2 to the summit resembles a little bit of what it's like to climb from the south summit to the summit on Everest. They're both rocky and corniced and things like that.
Okay.
And snow conditions, so it's a great simulation on a peak.
So if you want a little taste of Everest, just go over to Aspen and get
go
on
over to
Capitol.
Capitol Peak.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody who wants to start mountaineering, wants to get the 14ers, scratched off the list here in Colorado, but maybe a little scared or might not think they're up to it physically?
I think pick a mentor or a friend.
Yeah.
Pick someone that has maybe done a few of the hikes, and then really check in on your fitness program. And then make sure you take a lot of snacks and your rain jacket. I mean, just kind of a few things that will help you along the way.
Yeah. If you could give advice to your 20-year-old self about what the future might hold, knowing now what you know, what would you say to your 20-year-old self?
I would say, man, it's kind of a tough question, but I would say do it, go out and do it sooner and take a chance.
Yeah.
You know, like fully commit. You know, earlier when I was younger, it was tough because at first I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew that if I got an education, that would lead me to more. And so I still think I would tell myself the same thing, is like, get an education, put yourself in the position to deserve to go to those places, and just be really outgoing and meet as many people as you can.
Yeah, you've got a great life, and you have really carved out a niche that is incomparable. I don't know anybody else who's doing what you're doing, so it's pretty
It's
cool.
a very unique, scenario, and I'm grateful every day for it.
I'm still going to get to the top of Kilimanjaro with you, at the very least.
I would love to bring you and your family, actually.
Okay, maybe not Everest, but we'll do Kilimanjaro. Dr. John Kudrowski, thank you so much for joining us for this, the very first episode of Colorado Conversations.
Oh, what a privilege. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We're back with another episode tomorrow.
Download Fox 31 Plus from your App Store.